Sacrifice. The parasha today is Beshalach. It's Shemot 16 through 17:16. And there's a lot packed into this parasha. And we're going to just pull out a theme that I see as I read through it. But it's very much about relying on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to perform in the lives of his people. It's also about, however, leadership. Leadership is required among the people, even ourselves, but even within the context of the children of Israel at this time, in order to instill the courage to step into what God has defined for them. So there's a story about a man named Nachshon who was the brother-in-law of Aaron. If it wasn't for this man, the children of Israel would not have walked into the sea. So imagine you're coming out of Egypt. Imagine you're being chased by an army of madmen, right? Upset, angry at you for leaving, taking the spoils, right? And you find yourself against the sea, and there's nowhere to go. You're either pushed into the sea or you die at the hand of an enemy. And some people may think it's better to be pushed into the sea than die at the hand of another man. But the point is that they had a dilemma. So the staff of Aharon is raised, the staff of Moshe was raised, the rod of God, and the sea is parting. And as the sea is parting, imagine the eyes. Put yourself in the position of the children of Israel at that moment. The ground becomes dry, and the sea begins to split, and there's walls next to you. Who would go into that? Who would step into that? Especially no one who's ever seen a miracle like this before. I mean, these types of miracles, they're not used to them. 400 years of slavery, they're used to living in a normal environment in Egypt. Imagine if we were, at the beach, and all of a sudden the water splits and a big wall of water is on the side. Would you walk into that? First thing I would be doing is running further inland, right? But these guys stood there as the water was split, and somebody had to be the leader. And the Talmud talks about Nachshon, the brother-in-law of Aharon. It says that he stepped out first, that he was the one that first led the children of Israel into the waters. He had the courage to fulfill what God had for them, to fulfill the plan that God had for them. He had the courage to take the first step, which incidentally, he became one of the 70 elders that were appointed by Moshe and Aaron. But this parasha is about that leadership. And without leadership and without courage, we would often be afraid to step into the raging sea that God is about to part in order for us to escape the trial that is racing behind us. As the enemy's running as fast as it can toward us, God is preparing a way for us. And the enemy wants to stop what God has planned. He wants to stop what God has already planned for your life. But it takes courage on your part to step into what God has, to step into God's plan. It takes a spirit of leadership inside to sacrifice your own self-will for God's. Because maybe what God was requiring of you isn't exactly what you would do. Maybe what God is requiring of you isn't exactly what you would think in your mind or expect in your mind that this is who you would become. So it takes a significant portion of self-sacrifice to follow God's will, which ultimately leads to blessing even though you may encounter trying times on the road to that blessing. See, blessings from God are not easy to attain. Some people believe that you just sit back and God will just pour on you. Sometimes, in fact, in the context of the children of Israel, the blessings that they achieved were all very difficult to receive. They had to walk through a sea. They had to live in a desert. They had to see many people die. They had to eat food that fell from the sky. They couldn't hunt or farm, or nothing was done at their own hands, but it was very trying for them. If you put yourself in the position, it seems very trying. When we look backwards, we're saying to ourselves, oh, how easy is that? All they had to do is go out once a day, gather a bunch of stuff off the ground, put it in a basket, go back to their hut or whatever they had that they built for their home to live. It seems like a very easy life. But on the contrary, we know that it was very difficult because the masses would murmur and they would complain. When does murmuring and complaining happen? It happens when things are trialing on you, right? When your circumstances are difficult, you begin to complain about what you're experiencing. So you have to overcome the murmuring and the complaining, and you have to accept the position that you're in and the place that you're in. And you have to release your own self-will and embrace God's will, and the blessing will ultimately come. But Israel, the blessing that God had for the people of Israel, the land, the promise, did not come without having some very significant trials along the way. They had no water. They all got plagued with a disease. They had to, wait on food from God, and then the food that they would gather more because they got greedy, that food would spoil and rot and mold. It was an interesting time. It was a trialing time for the people of Israel. Even though when we read it as, oh, look how awesome and powerful God was. Put yourself in the place of that person. Put yourself in your own life today. The trials that you've experienced, have you ever equated those trials to the fact that God is bringing you through something? He's brought you through this experience so that you might realize a greater blessing at the end. Most of the time when we experience hardships in life, we think, why on earth did this happen to me? Why me? What did I ever do? Well, that's the complaining. It's the same thing the children of Israel experienced. It's human nature. It's human nature to act that way. They're no different than we are. But let's think on this leadership concept. Exodus chapter 17, at the end of the parashah, verse 9 through 16. They come to a place where they have to fight Amalek. Okay, and we're going to talk about here. Let's start with verse 9. It says, and Moshe said to Joshua, choose us out men. So immediately Moshe is going to Joshua and he's saying, find us leaders. Find us men that will lead, that will have courage. And go out and fight with Amalek. Interesting that these men in Israel, they had to do the fighting. Why would God not seriously obliterate them like he did Paro and his armies? Why would God not just eliminate Amalek? Why would God not just take care of this army as he did with the Egyptian armies? Why is it that now Joshua had to have the courage to find men that would fight? Well, as their backs are against the wall, they just left Egypt, these are a weak people. These are a weak people that experienced no such miracle before, lived in slavery and under the oppression of this army of Mitzrayim. Imagine the thought in the mind of those men who just came out of the oppression of this authority. Imagine if you told them that you have to fight against The men, the very men that whipped you, that slashed you, that forced you to do hard labor. Imagine, your mind automatically believes that they're more powerful than you because you were subject to them for 400 plus years. They couldn't have won that battle, so God parts the sea. He gets them through it, and he kills the armies of Mitzrayim and Pharaoh. But now they have been through some things. It's Exodus, Shemot 17. They've been through some things. They've been through some trials. They know that God is behind them. They've seen the miracles at work, and they know that what they put their mind to, they can achieve. So God gives them the charge. You fight with Amalek. But the people, imagine the people without the leadership of other men that motivate them, without the leadership of men and even women that would motivate them into going to battle with Amalek, they would have said, we will die at the hand of these men. We're a weak, subservient people who are farmers. How could we win against these warriors? So it said, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. And now, what Moshe has just done is he associated this battle to their first experience coming out of Mitzrayim. The children of Israel stood there and watched as Moshe had his arms raised, and the seas are parting. They're imagining the rod of God. The rod of God, if it's in the air, if Moshe's arms are raised, then we shall win. Because Moshe is our conduit between God and our battle. So now the men have something to trigger in their mind that as long as I can keep my eye on that, and I see that Moshe is winning, I will win too. But the moment I see that Moshe is weakening, it's as if God himself is weakening. And so they may lose. And as the arms are raised, they're winning the battle. And as the arms are lowered, they're losing the battle. Imagine, is this really God making them lose, or is it the psychology of man? Because the man is connected, his arms being raised, to the conduit between him and God. And God is working with him, and he's pleased with him, and he's got the connection. And when the man sees that the arms are weakening, imagine the feeling of that man. Oh no! And then they get defensive and defensive. They lose their aggression. They lose their ability to fight. They lose their ability to go in and win this battle. But then here comes Hur and the other guys to hold the arms of Moshe, and they're holding them up high, so that the men on the battlefield see that we are victorious. And they fight, and they win. He said, and Moses, Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill, and it came to pass when Moses held up his hands, and that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hands, Amalek prevailed. Not because God changed. Not because God wasn't with them. Not because God didn't plan for them to endure. Because we can't connect the power of God to the act of holding your arms in the air. Because now you're connecting God's power to a man. As if Moshe would weaken, God would weaken. No, never. God was the same. He was as consistent as can be. It was the man who was weakened. The leadership needed to give the man a signpost to follow so that man's courage would be built up. Without the leadership of the man, they would never know what was possible through God. They would never understand it. And so Moshe knew, I have to hold my arms up high. And as I hold my arms up high, the men will see me. They will look to me. And they will say that we have God on our side. And if my arms are lowered, they'll believe that we're weakening Aaron and Hur. I need you to support me so that the men do not think that God's power is gone. Moses is smart. Moses understands that the power of God is not in his own arms. But he also understands man, you and I. A very faithful believer in Yeshua comes down with a bout of cancer. Somebody says, that faithful believer will be healed. And they all believe. And a leader behind a bema shouts out, you're healed, ma'am or sir. And they all believe. And 6 months later, that faithful believer, they pass on. And what happens to the faith of all those that believed that what that leader had said would come to pass? Immediately, we have to come up with reasons why. That leader would lose his leadership if he didn't. Well, it's not for everyone. And unfortunately, in some congregations, they'll even say that they didn't have the faith themselves, which is absolute, tragic to say. In fact, it's unrighteous and wicked. It falls on the just and the unjust. And the will of God is the will of God. No matter if it's for good or for bad, it's the will of God. Therefore, we self-sacrifice our will to His. It's not our plan, it's His plan. My plan is that you're healed. God's plan is that you be with Him in 6 months. But if I stand and say that you will be and then you're not, what happens to the faith of those people? It's like, well, God doesn't heal, which is wrong. God heals when He plans to heal. Everyone has a time. We have a time to live and a time to die, a time to laugh, cry, all that. We all have a time. God's timing is what matters, not our timing. But unfortunately, we put lots of weight in men and what they say and their leadership. Therefore, God appoints men to lead and guide and direct. And that guy who said that person should be healed was not connected well with God. Wrong advice, wrong leadership. But Moses knew what it took to lead. He knew what he had to do and say. He knew what the people were capable of. He knew that God would give them the power to win if he stood there strong with them. Mind you, they already saw this man march into Pharaoh's kingdom and pull them out of Egypt. He was an absolute icon. He was an icon in their eyes. He was an absolute miracle. 400 odd years of slavery and we escaped. Oh, and we've got gold and silver to boot. How on earth does this happen? This man was already set up to be the greatest leader in the history of Israel. He knew his position. When he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Yehoshua. I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moshe built an altar and called the name of it Yahweh Nisi, for he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation to generation to generation. And that doesn't stop, because when he says that, that's what he means. Forever and in ever in perpetuity. From the moment that the children of Israel left Egypt till this very day, the world has witnessed that God has occupied Israel with myriad emotions, which include fear, which include anger, confusion, pain, reliance upon God only, and ultimately giving up self-will. The children of Israel have not had it easy, contrary to popular belief. Every day is a struggle. There's a popular saying in the homes of the Jewish people that we like to repeat. They didn't kill us today, so let's eat. Because there's always someone trying to kill us. Why? Many argue that the Jewish people are resilient and that their self-determination is unsurpassed. But we can also argue that many of those individuals that encountered this experience failed and ultimately died as a result of not giving up self-will. Yes, many are resilient. Yes, many overcome. Yes, many win. But how many more of Israel has died in the wake of these trials? Just in the desert alone, generations had to be killed off before blessing could occur because of their inability to have resolve. However, a remnant has always surfaced and proven that God's divine will and authority carries us through the trial, but we must endure. Modern examples of resilience and determination on the people of Israel: the Holocaust, the 6-Day War, every act of terrorism that exists in the land of Israel to this day, the constant battle and fight and struggle to win the land of Israel as its own. Enemies in Iran, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, Russia, surrounded by enemies. In the United States, people like to say they use anti-Semitic slurs and slang. Because you're Jewish, you understand money, you think you're smarter than everyone else. All these things killed the people of Israel. And to this day, they still are warring. And the reality has been, unless we give up our own will to rely solely on God's protection, we ultimately fail in battle. In every fight, we will fail. In every battle, we will fail. It doesn't matter if it's in land, or if it's on the sea, or if it's in our minds. We will fail the battle at all costs if we do not release our own will and give it to God. It doesn't matter how great our self-determination is. It doesn't matter how resilient we are to overcome in the face of adversity. What ultimately matters is what God has destined, what He has allotted for us as a result of our submission to His will. That is the only thing that matters. In modern day today, there's theories and ideas that say that all you have to do is will it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands and all things will come to you. The power of positive thinking. We're subject to an almighty God who has planned our lives and who has given us the ability to become who we are. It's the abilities that we have are provided to us. They're not made by us. It's not my self-determination that wins. It's God's that He gave me that wins. Today's parasha is the staging ground for helping us understand how the Lord desires a people that rely on Him amid the trials and storms of life and the leadership it requires of us to help guide others into the obedience God requires for blessing. We have to lead people to understand how to gain blessing. Blessing comes out of obedience. Obedience to what? Obedience to what? His ways, His law. The mere fact that you give 10% to a church or to a congregation or to this temple of your salary does not mean blessing for you. You'll get that in the church. In fact, you'll be blessed. And if you don't have it and you need it, give more and you'll get more. Credit card, we also accept credit cards. That's not the road to blessing, people. We have to teach people obedience, but then obedience has to become a second nature. That obedience has to be a true desire to do God's will. It can't be out of a want for yourself. You can't be obedient for selfish reasons and expect the blessing to occur. You can't. That's not even biblical, but it's taught. If you need a house, you need your mortgage paid off. I remember when our president was elected, there was a person in the street that was being interviewed, and literally she said that, I praise God right now that I prayed that he would become elected because now my mortgage will be paid. I would love to go see that lady and determine whether or not her mortgage was paid. And then try to find out where she went to get that, because I would love that too. But what kind of selfish reason? I praise God. She praised God that somebody was elected so that she could pay her mortgage. That's not even a thought. Your mortgage is an obligation that you made. God never made that obligation. You decided to get a mortgage and mortgage a home. That's not God's fault. He doesn't give that to you for free. You work now. You go to your job. You work hard and you pay for that because you wanted that. But by no means should you pray for an election so that God can bless you by relieving you of all of your wicked debts. All of these debts I have are wicked. All of those debts you have, you made. So what are the root of the debts? You are. You're the wicked one. I mean, it's the logic. It's so easy to me to think through that. It makes so much sense to me. But for whatever reason, the rest of the world, I don't know why they're not seeing it. It comes squarely back on your shoulders. Why would I pray to God for that? God, I'd say, forgive me. I've got too much debt. I incurred the debt. Forgive me. Enable me, Father, to find a job, to earn a skill set, so that I might earn a wage, that I can afford the debt that I incurred. That's the prayer that you pray. And you go out and you get yourself the skill set so that you might wait. That's the leadership I'm talking about. Leading people the right way, guiding them in obedience. I could be the guy, the story of the king that's walking through his kingdom without his kimono on. And everyone just stays silent, right? We know that, some of us know that story. Well, is it right to stay silent? The guy doesn't know he doesn't have his kimono on. He drank a little too much, and he's running through the hall naked in front of all of his subjects. It's the wise thing of that man to say, you need to put your kimono on. But we hush our mouths. Why? Because it may affect us. It may hurt us. People may leave our church. People may leave our congregation if we tell them the truth. We tell them what they want to hear. Everything we need to hear has been in the Bible, and it's clear. It's not hard to interpret. No self-determination that we have, no resilience that we have to overcome in adversity will get us to a destination of blessing. Only God can give that. 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 13. Brethren, I would not have ye be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink. Someone's making a really significant point. They're making a very significant point. Everyone had the same food. Everyone had the same drink. Everyone experienced the same thing. Okay? This is a very significant point. We all went out to dinner last night, and one of us got food poisoning. We all ate the same food, but no one else got food poisoning. Somebody else slipped something else in there. You had a ham sandwich in your purse or your pocket. You must not have had everything we had because no one else got it. You know the point I'm trying to make here? Same point is being made right here. For they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Mashiach. Anywhere it says Christ, that's a title, okay? The rock was Messiah. But with many of them, God was not well pleased. Why? We all had the same experience. We all did the same thing. We all ate the same meat. For they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as they were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. What does that mean? They ignored their circumstances. They wanted to experience, they wanted the same experience as in Egypt. Let us not comfort fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. The golden calf. Let us tempt Messiah, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. The plague and the disease they received. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happened unto them for examples. This is instruction. This is leadership. Somebody's teaching these people of Corinth how to be obedient and follow the law. Somebody's teaching them. Somebody's leading them. And it's the correct leadership. Now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that think he stands take heed lest he fall. Let him who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. Why? Because there's nothing he can do himself. If you think you stand, and it's your own thinking that you stand, it's your own self-determination that will make you win the battle, it's your own resilience that will make you win this battle, think again, dude. Because you're on your way to a fall. Nothing is given but by God. He says, there's no temptation taken to you, but as such as is common to man. That's very important to hear. You know why? Because you think you're special with the trials you go through, with the temptations you go through, the ones I go through. We as a body, we think we're special. And here we're being told, there's nothing that has come to man that's not common. He says, but God's faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above what you're able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape, that ye may be able to bear it. He will crack the sea if he needs to. He will crack the sea. But his goal is that your eyes stay upon him, so that you yourself can fight the battle with him by your side. We have to be strong in the Lord to know that he's with us, that we will overcome by his power, not by our own. And if we should fall, it was his will. The scriptures in this parashah display the miracles that God performed to reveal his sovereignty over the earth and all that are within it. We see sovereignty of God in Egypt as he forces the Egyptian Pharaoh to let Israel go. It continues as a cloud to lead them. The sovereignty of God is a cloud. It leads them through the wilderness of the Red Sea, and then God dries the sea and destroys the armies of Pharaoh. And then as Israel searches for water, God allows the rocks to weep. And he reveals his sovereignty. And then the people are complaining of not having the good food to eat, as they reflect upon the flesh pots of Egypt. And God allots them their portion daily from raining down upon them food for sustenance, which even includes quail, which he did not have to do. All of these things happened as a result of God's direction and the movement of his hand. The people were crying out. They were murmuring about neglect and how God has brought them to this wilderness to die. But we have seen that God allowed for this experience. He allowed for them to go through this. He did not kill them unless they deserved death, unless they themselves were idolaters, unless they themselves were fornicators. But he allowed them to go through this persecution. Perhaps he did this in order to trial the people, to test their reliance on him. Does God test people? Is he allowing you to be tested now in your life? 1 Corinthians states that there is no temptation that is not common to man. No man has experienced a trial or temptation so unique that every other man has not come into contact with that same experience. Maybe it's a different environment. Maybe it's in a different instance. But the same feeling that you get, someone else has gotten. The same fear, the same trepidation, the same overwhelming sadness, the same courage, the same angst, the same resolve. Someone else has felt that same experience. But we like to think that our situations and our circumstances are unique, that they're special, because it makes us feel unique and special. But there are and were men and women that currently and prior to this life are experiencing the exact same trials, the same storms, and the same circumstances that we do now. And the scriptures provide us with all of the possible angles that temptation can take with us. Each shape and each form is outlined and colorfully painted for us to see and hear so that we may know how to respond when we come face to face with the wiles of the enemy. We may know how to respond to that temptation. The Word of God gives us our response. The only way to learn how to respond is to learn the Word of God. That's it. When I say you got to be obedient, obedient to what? Obedient to what your pastor or your rabbi says? No. Obedient to the Word of God. When you have a trial, when you have a storm, when you have a tribulation, is the first thing you do is try to manage through it yourself? Or do you immediately come down and bow your head to God and say, Lord, what shall I do? It's easy. It's easy to get caught up in yourself, especially when you're like yourselves, very smart people. The smarter you are, the easier it is not to rely on God, because you can rely on yourself. Well, I can think through that. But rather than thinking through it yourself, why not have God align the stars? Why not have God make it perfect? James chapter 1, 1 through 4, it says, James, a servant of God of the Lord Yeshua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. Count it for joy when you are tempted. What? Crazy talk. But know this, that the trying of your faith works patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. That's like something my mom would tell me. Have patience, son, while I'm in the middle of being irritated. Are you kidding me right now? You're telling me to be patient in the middle of this? You'll want nothing when it's done. Oh, you're like this. And la, 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 la. All right? It's that kind of environment. You're all stressed out. I was stressed out this week. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone who works for me, trying to have this person not quit because I need him. And I'm stressed and talking to this guy. And the funny thing is, the conversation's all about stress. He's stressed, that's why he wants to quit. So I said, yeah, I know, this is stressful, and I'm stressing out. And my mom, I didn't tell her, but she texted me a picture. This is a stress-free zone. The very moment I'm having the conversation. And so I clicked the picture, and I turned it around, and I said, I just received this from my mother. She's telling us both this. Leadership. So my mom's leading me into obedience. Right? She doesn't know it, but she's doing it. Why? Because she's obedient. She's being obedient to God. And in her obedience, it's actually leading me. Not even realizing she's being obedient. And then I'm obedient because I see it, and I'm sitting there literally stressed out, about to freak out. And I read it, I'm like, well, okay, well, I hear that loud and clear. And then I have to be obedient and share with the guy that's sitting across from me. I mean, that's the environment that we live in. God will work if you release to him. James is saying that trials work patience out in our lives. What do trials make us patient for? I believe he means that trials create the patience required to wait upon God for our needs. It's patience to wait on God. That's the most difficult thing to do, is to wait on God. To the point that we end up wanting nothing and appreciating everything. Imagine, and this is where the impetus of this verse comes in. If you wait on God You have no expectation of anything else but what God has planned for you. And imagine if in a verse in a minute we're going to read that don't worry about what you're going to wear tomorrow. Imagine if you actually did that. You didn't worry where you were going to eat your meal, where were you going to get clothed, where were you going to, all of those things. You didn't worry about that, but you just said, I'm waiting on God. God's going to move. Now, that's absolutely impossible to do because we're always thinking about the future. Now, there will be people that will lie to you, and they'll tell you that you can do that. I'm not going to lie to you because I don't think our minds are wired that way. So for us to sit back and just say, I'm going to wait on God, what that would end up doing is we would all be bums living in the street and waiting for God to tell us where our next meal comes from. And then if you just sit there and wait, sooner or later, it's going to be negative 30 degrees outside and you're going to be dead. Right? I'm going to sit outside in the negative 30 degree weather. I don't have a very nice winter coat. I don't have hats and a goggle. And I'm just going to sit there and go, I'll wait on God. He will supply it. No, dude, get up off your duff and you go get yourself in a warm environment because God doesn't pay for stupidity. But you'll run into a place, you'll get up and you'll run and you'll find a sea and it'll crack open and you'll run through it and you'll be safe. Because He'll never allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear. He'll provide you a way out. But God's movement is the same as ours. It's in motion. We have to be in motion because God is in motion. If we stay stagnant, God can't move for us. He can't move for us. But we can't have our expectations be God's, because when they're not aligned, we get disappointed in God. When we have an expectation and God doesn't fulfill that expectation, we immediately think God didn't want to bless us. No, that just wasn't God's intention. Therefore, you should want nothing. And when you receive what God does give you, you will be happy all the time. Trials will either increase your reliance on God, ultimately destroying your expectation, or they'll decrease your reliance on God and cause you to foster your own expectation. God is working to move in our lives, but because we have so many expectations, we view everything that is contrary to that expectation as a trial against our own goals. Question we have to be asking one another is, why do our goals not align to God's? It's not, why did God not bless me and give me what I wanted? The question is, why did what I want not align to what God wanted to give me? That's the proper lesson. You need to ask yourself, I wanted this, I got this, God must have wanted me to receive this. Why did I really want this? Well, I'm not in line with God. You should immediately be saying to yourself, well, I better get in line with God. And when you get in line with God, you learn to want nothing and expect Him to do whatever He so desires for you. If we take each day as its own, allow God to move as He wills, then when we are blessed, we're appreciative and we're awed by His wonder and mercy. But if we enter the day with expectation and that expectation is not satisfied, then our faith will be tried by the enemy, because our expectation, though it may be honest and good and just, is in fact our weakness. Let me use an example. It's Jason's birthday today. Ask me what I got him for his birthday. Zip. But maybe Jason woke up today and he thought, today's my birthday. Michael's going to get me a present. And he shows up to Shabbat and he's silent. And I say to him, hey, happy birthday. He says, thanks, man. And he's saying to himself, I can't wait to see what he got me. And all day goes, and he's just keeping his mouth shut. I'm preaching. We're singing. We go to Oneg. We have a meal. We break some bread. We enjoy our time. We're talking well. He thinks he's getting a gift. I have not said anything about a gift. He goes to walk out the door, and he's thinking, he's going to surprise us as I walk out the door. He walks out the door. He gets in his car. All along, I'm sitting in here chilling out with you guys. I did not get him a gift. He gets in his car. He starts to drive off. He's totally, mind jacked. Because he expected me to get him a gift today. Now, imagine 4 months from now, I walk into the congregation and I say to him, hey man, I was thinking about you yesterday and I got you a gift. And I give him a present. He is absolutely floored. He's awed. He's thankful. He's appreciated. Why? Because it wasn't for any reason. He didn't expect it. Why would you buy me a gift? Why would I not? I don't know. Why would you? I was thinking about you. So he's in the state of expectation today. 4 months from now, he's going to think it's like any other day. He's not in a state of expectation. So the gift means something more when I give it to him on my own versus giving what he expects me to give him. It's no different. That's the concept here. You wait on God. When God decides to shower, then he will. And if he does not, then he does not. But that doesn't change your faith, your belief, your strength, and your honor to him. Or your obedience to his word. Now, if you have expectation and that expectation is great, guess what it is? I call it a weakness. Your expectation is your weakness. Why is it your weakness? Because the enemy can use your expectation for his purpose. The enemy uses our weaknesses as a tool to create doubt and to force us to question God and to make our own choices outside of his predestined will for themselves. The enemy uses our expectations to doubt God. Just like the story I told you in the beginning about the pastor who said you shall be healed, and that woman or male or whoever it may have been has died. Everyone knows a story like that. Everyone has that story. Your expectation that that person would have been healed has caused doubt in you. And the enemy now is being successful at his job. Let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. This is how the enemy uses your expectation, your weakness. Your lust is what you expect. Your lust is what you want. It's not what God wants, it's what you want. And when what you want pulls you away, you are then tempted. And you are then enticed. And when the lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and comes down from the Father of lights, and whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth. He did that on his own accord, that we should be of kind of first fruits of his creatures. The parting of the Red Sea, the destruction of Pharaoh's army, the water in the desert, the manna, the destruction of Amalek, all these things were given to Israel, not created by them. They didn't ask for that. God gave that to them. That's very important. I'm sure they were asking to release them from slavery. I'm sure they were praying, Lord, take us out of this slavery. But then again, maybe they weren't. They enjoyed the flesh pots. They enjoyed their lives. They missed Egypt. How can you miss Egypt if it's truly that bad? No measure of resilience, no measure of self-determination could have brought water from a rock or food from the sky. I can think as hard and dream as hard as I want, but manna will not fall from the sky. God will or he will not. That's purely on him. No measure of self-determination could have caused a group of weak, tired slaves to destroy an army of men that were warriors and a part of a great kingdom. The provisions of Israel have always been given to them by God and never on Israel's own efforts, either scripturally, and I'll argue modern day, have they been afforded anything without the hand of God extending it to them. Without God giving it to them. This is the beautiful thing about being a member of Israel. You will always have trials and storms, both individually and corporately. But when you rely on God for your expectation, you can have peace of mind to know that even though the waves around you are raging, the path is straight and ordered by God himself. And when you are a member of Israel, as each of you are, it is impossible to view this life and the life and times of our forefathers past as a distinct creation of ourselves or the people that preceded us. We did not create this life. We are provided this life. You can't create your own destiny. Your destiny is provided when you give that up to God and you sacrifice your own will. Destiny plays a significant role in the lives of Israel. The role of Israel is and always has been to simply follow and obey the commands of God, and everything else would be an additive blessing provided by God as a result of our dedication. It's an additive blessing. Everything is additive. Just follow him. Obey him. The people of God are not to worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow is in the hands of God. Luke talks specifically about this, as we discussed before. Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, neither for your body, what you shall put on. The life more than meat, the body's more than raiment. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap, which neither a storehouse nor barn. God feeds them. How much more are you better than the fowl? And so on, and so on, and so on. The road is sometimes long for those who are called, because there are many lessons to be learned prior to coming into the calling. There are oftentimes many trials that we must endure because we have not learned to relinquish our own expectations and truly rely on God for our daily bread. Realize sometimes your trial is created on your own. Because if I have an expectation, that expectation is a lust, and my lust carries me away and entice me. And then that lust causes me to be tempted. That's my own temptation. That's my own. I caused that of myself. God did not. I did. People will come to us and they'll say, why am I experiencing this? Why am I going through this? And they'll give us an example of the things they're experiencing. And you have to play judge, discerning, whether it's God or whether it's you yourself. Well, if you wouldn't have done that, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in now. God didn't make you do that. You chose to do that. You chose to do that because you were followed in, enticed by your own lusts. There are oftentimes many trials that we must endure because we've not learned to relinquish our own expectations and rely on God for our daily bread. Still, we remember and reflect on the flesh pots that others around us have. We view the successes and joys of others greater than the blessings of ourselves. And this requires a certain amount of testing, a certain amount of trialing to burn away that hay, the stubble and the chaff. Unhappy with our daily allotment, we seek to fulfill our own desires and our own expectations, and the food we make when we wake is spoiled with worms and mold because it was not provided to us by God. Here in Exodus chapter 16, it says, the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, when we ate bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. And then said the Lord unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven, and the people will go and gather a certain rate every day, and I may prove them, that I might prove them, whether they will walk in my law or not. The manna is a picture of God's allotment or portion of true life that he has set aside for me and you. God uses the manna to prove the children of Israel in the wilderness. It's a furnace of sorts. A furnace that he uses to burn away the dross from the good-hearted and right-minded that desire to keep his law. In a teaching that I read on the parashah, it discusses how for 40 years the children of Israel were sustained by bread from heaven, instilling them the recognition that sustenance comes entirely from God, that no matter how much one toils to earn his livelihood, he receives no more and no less than what has been allotted him from above. The challenge is to retain this recognition in modern day. After entering the land and making the transition to bread from the earth, even when we are nourished by bread which we earn by the sweat of our brow, we must remember that in truth our sustenance comes from God, and that we never receive an iota more or an iota less than what is allotted us from above. Hence, the connection between the manna and the mitzvah of Shabbat. Shabbat too carries this lesson, serving as a weekly reminder that our sustenance comes from God. On the face of it, it might seem that ceasing work one day a week would lessen our income, but the Jew knows that his earthly labor is only the channel through which God chooses to supply him what is essential, bread from heaven. And that the best and most efficient conduit is one that conforms to the will of him who supplies sustenance to all his creatures. Today, I encourage you to relinquish your expectations. Do not be as those children of Israel in the wilderness that murmured and complained against God because he was not provided you with what you believe to be important. Live today as if it is God's to give, as if it is God's to provide. And be happy at the end of your day because God brought you the blessing of living and loving and learning to overcome in the face of adversity, trial, and storm. And when you have learned all of these things, lead others to that same understanding. Lead others to that same obedience. Amen? It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the author of creation. For he made us unlike the nations of the lands, has not placed us like the families of the earth. He's not made our portion like theirs, and our lot like all their multitudes. We bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. He stretches out heaven and establishes the foundations of earth, and the seat of his glory is in the heavens above, and the presence of his power is in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there is none other. True is our King, there's nothing beside him. As it is written in his Torah, you shall know this day and take to your heart, the Lord he is God in the heavens above and on the earth below, there is none other.